So what is on the checklist for the rest of the week for you? A couple more days of running coming up.
Well, hoping to experience the car in the dry. And and I think just understanding balance, understanding the new SM that we have and how to utilize it, and feel it. I've not driven it in the dry, so I don't really have a feeling for it. Obviously, we drove it in the wet, which is only the front part. And then just understanding the deployment. I think deployment's going to be crucial, and understanding that, how to utilize the power, the battery throughout the lap, and recharging, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, we've done a huge amount of work. Everyone's done a huge amount of work on the simulator, so it's not like it's 100% brand new for us. But we still have to go through our sessions and through the data to try and optimize it.
Can a single driver change the technical destiny of an entire team? What did Hamilton see in the SF26 that not even Ferrari had detected after 18 months of development? When the SF26 finally took to the track at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya, the world was able to witness what was already sensed in the halls of Maranello. Something different was happening with Lewis Hamilton at the wheel. Unlike other presentations, this was not a formal day. It was a controlled display of precision, track reading, and above all, instant understanding of a completely new car. While most of the pilots used the first turns to check basic systems, adjust their seat, check the steering wheel, and adapt to the initial behavior of the car, Hamilton jumped directly into the deep exploration phase of the mechanical potential of the SF26. And he did it with surgical coldness. In just 3 fast laps, he was already working with hybrid modes not included in the initial test plan. His driving style was immediately adapted to the new 50-50 regulation, which requires perfect symmetry between the power delivery of the thermal engine and the delivery of the electrical system. Where others doubted, he made decisions. I used the energy regeneration mode aggressively in areas where stability was supposed to be maintained, seeking to see if the car was capable of maintaining traction under high hybrid loads. The conclusion: SF26 not only could withstand it, but reacted better to that type of treatment. It was as if the car was waiting for a driver who would dare to use it with that level of intensity. In medium-speed corners, Hamilton began to defy conventional logic. Instead of maintaining the traditional long apex step that characterizes Leclerc, the Briton shortened the rotation phase. He braked later, but not violently. He did it with controlled progression to keep the car platform stable and thus be able to apply the accelerator much earlier than expected. This early application of power generated an immediate redistribution of the center of gravity towards the rear axle, which gave it more traction on long outings. In the telemetry data, this translated into notable gains, especially in stretches of sustained acceleration such as the exits of Turn 3 and the final chicane. This driving pattern was exactly what Ferrari engineers had not considered viable until that day. In contrast, Charles Leclerc was running a different, meticulous program focused on validating the correlation between simulator and real track. His driving was still fast but more methodical. It made better use of the tire's limit when entering a curve and applied its characteristic overlap between brake and accelerator, a technique that requires great precision and allows maintaining a continuous degree of rotation in a curve, maintaining the highest possible minimum speed. It was effective, no doubt, but it had a narrower window of operation. A change in side wind or a thermal variation in the compound was enough to alter that delicate balance. Hamilton, on the other hand, was widening that window. The engineers, sitting in front of their screens in the garage, began to notice something unusual. For the first time in years, they were getting competitive data with 2 completely opposite driving styles. It was not a minor detail. Ferrari had spent 3 seasons designing extremely responsive cars, which only responded within a very precise configuration. They were fast when everything was aligned, but vulnerable to the slightest misalignment. The SF26, under the direct influence of Hamilton, was beginning to show itself as an adaptable single-seater. The car's breadth of responses was no coincidence. It was a result of the technical demands that Hamilton had raised during the winter. But what Hamilton showed in just a couple of sessions raised an uncomfortable, almost taboo question within the team. What if the car was not built for Leclerc, but for someone like Hamilton? That idea sparked a high-voltage technical debate in Maranello. On the one hand, there were the engineers who had worked for years to maximize the synergy between Leclerc and each version of the Ferrari, fine-tuning a car that seemed to respond only to its style. On the other hand, a new school of thought was now emerging, driven by the arrival of Hamilton, which proposed a broader, more universal approach. A car that responded not only to one man's style, but to physical and dynamic principles that can adapt to multiple hands. What was at stake was not just a chassis configuration. It was Ferrari's technical identity. The fact that Hamilton, without knowing the internal recesses of the team, could identify weaknesses, propose solutions, and, above all, obtain results from the first moment, put in check the operating model that had been working with successes and errors for several years. Some members of the technical staff began to rethink whether they had been unconsciously limiting the car's development by working under a single reference. Because when a second driver with such a different vision arrives and makes the same car perform the same or better, the entire paradigm is shaken. From the first day on the track, Charles Leclerc knew that something had changed. It was neither a declared threat nor a frontal challenge. It was something more subtle, more disturbing. For the first time since his arrival at Ferrari, he shared a garage with a driver whose influence exceeded sports. Hamilton not only provided speed, he provided structure, technical authority, and a reading of the race that resonated strongly within the team. For Leclerc, this was not simply the arrival of a champion. It was the appearance of a new centrifugal force that began to divert the attention that for years had revolved exclusively around him. During the first tests in Barcelona, the data spoke louder than any gesture or statement. The comparative telemetry not only showed differences in lap times, but also in driving philosophy. Where Leclerc applied his mastery of maintaining prolonged lateral load in long corners, taking advantage of the limit of the tire, Hamilton made surgical decisions. Deep braking, efficient mass transfers, and corner exits with a power application so early that it broke all previously accepted patterns at Ferrari. There were two styles, two schools, two ways of understanding the car. And they both worked. That functioning was precisely what worried Leclerc, because until now he was the reference. His way of driving defined how the engine maps were tuned, how the suspensions were adjusted, how the aerodynamic parts were developed. Suddenly, that exclusive model was replaced by a hybrid one, in which its companion not only matched its performance, but did so with an opposite approach. This unsettled the technical team, but even more so for Leclerc himself. Not because he felt he was going to be immediately displaced, but because he perceived that his leadership was no longer unquestionable, and that change does not happen with words. It occurs in gestures, in the silences inside the box, in how the engineers look at the data on the screen and stay a couple of seconds longer on the line of car number 44, in how Hamilton's feedback begins to have its own weight, regardless of established hierarchies. Leclerc, who has always been characterized by his competitive but diplomatic nature, began to show subtle signs of tension. Longer conversations with his engineer, unexpected changes in his setup configurations, and above all, an urgency to regain an advantage that until recently seemed guaranteed. The rivalry is not open. There are no inflammatory statements or friction on the track. But there is an atmosphere, a constant pulse to mark territory. Leclerc knows that he cannot allow mistakes, because Hamilton, with all his experience and serenity, does not need to prove anything. He just executes. And he does it with a precision that is psychologically damaging. It is a silent but constant pressure. And that, in Ferrari's extremely demanding environment, has profound consequences. For Leclerc, this challenge represents the most delicate turning point of his career. It's no longer about beating your teammate in lap times. It is about maintaining its position as a pillar of the project. And to achieve this, he will have to reinvent himself, not only as a driver, but as a figure within a team that now sees in Hamilton something more than a guest star. He sees it as a possible cornerstone of the future. And the big question that arises in the paddock is not whether Leclerc is fast. That is not in doubt. The question is if he can resist this hidden pressure, if he will know how to become the leader he needs to be, before someone else becomes one for him. As the Barcelona tests came to an end, the numbers, sensations, and internal dynamics began to raise a question that was impossible to ignore. Is this SF26 a car conceived unknowingly for Lewis Hamilton? The question seems paradoxical, almost provocative. Because on paper, the car was designed to take the definitive leap with Charles Leclerc as the spearhead. It was developed based on years of feedback from the Monegasque driver, with the aim of expanding performance, correcting historical weaknesses, and maximizing compatibility with your driving style. And yet, it was another driver who unlocked his true potential. The SF26, under the new 2026 technical regulation, requires a full understanding of hybrid management, dynamic balance under different aerodynamic loads, and, above all, how to operate in a technical window that is, by definition, wider but also more unstable. Leclerc interpreted it as a challenge that required refinement and sensitivity. Hamilton, on the other hand, approached it as a flexible, malleable platform, capable of being transformed according to his own demands. That difference is not minor. In the world of Formula One, where car development often aligns with the DNA of a top driver, the fact that the newcomer is a better fit almost by default poses an uncomfortable but fascinating scenario. The SF26 has yet to win a race, but it has made something much more important clear. It is not just a technical product, but a mirror that reflects the soul of those who use it. And today, that reflection begins to look more and more like Lewis Hamilton. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.